From La Relacion by Alvar Nunez Cabeza de Vaca. At this point in the account, Narvaez's barge has abandoned the rest, and Cabeza de Vaca's barge has joined one commanded by two other officers. The next 3 chapters describe the crew's shipwreck on Galveston Island and their encounter with the Karankawa Indians who lived there. A sinking and a landing. Our 2 barges continued in company for 4 days, each man eating a ration of half a handful of raw corn a day. Then the other barge was lost in a storm. Nothing but God's great mercy kept us from going down too. It was winter and bitterly cold, and we had suffered hunger and the heavy beating of the waves for many days. Next day, the men began to collapse. By sunset, all in my barge had fallen over on one another, close to death. Few were any longer conscious. Not 5 could stand. When night fell, only the navigator and I remained able to tend the barge. 2 hours after dark, he told me I must take over. He believed he was going to die that night. So I took the tiller. After midnight, I moved over to see if he were dead. He said no, in fact was better, and would steer till daylight. In that hour, I would have welcomed death rather than see so many around me in such a condition. When I had returned the helm to the navigator, I lay down to rest, but without much rest, for nothing was farther from my mind than sleep. Near dawn, I seemed to hear breakers resounding, the coast lying low. They roared louder. Surprised at this, I called to the navigator, who said he thought we were coming close to land. We sounded and found ourselves in 7 fathoms. The navigator felt we should stay clear of the shore till daylight. So I took an oar and pulled it on the shore side, wheeling the stern to seaward about a league out. As we drifted into shore, a wave caught us and heaved the barge a horseshoe throw, about 42 feet, out of the water. The jolt, when it hit, brought the dead-looking men to. Seeing land at hand, they crawled through the surf to some rocks. Here we made a fire and parched some of our corn. We also found rainwater. The men began to regain their senses, their locomotion, and their hope. This day of our landing was November 6. What befell Oviedo with the Indians? After we ate, I ordered Lope de Oviedo, our strongest man, to climb one of the trees not far off and ascertain the lay of the land. He complied and found out from the treetop that we were on an island. This was Galveston Island. He also said that the ground looked as if cattle had trampled it, and therefore that this must be a country of Christians. I sent him back for a closer look to see if he could find any worn trails, but warned him not to risk going too far. He went and came upon a path which he followed for half a league to some empty huts. The Indians were gone to Shoal Flats to dig roots. He took an earthen pot, a little dog, and a few mullets, and started back. We had begun to worry what might have happened to him, so I detailed another 2 men to check. They met him shortly and saw 3 Indians with bows and arrows following him. The Indians were calling to him, and he was gesturing them to keep coming. When he reached us, the Indians held back and sat down on the shore. Half an hour later, 100 bowmen reinforced the first 3 individuals. Whatever their stature, they looked like giants to us in our fright. We could not hope to defend ourselves. Not half a dozen of us could even stand up. The inspector, Solis, and I walked out and greeted them. They advanced, and we did our best to placate and ingratiate. We gave them beads and bells, and each one of them gave us an arrow in pledge of friendship. They told us by signs that they would return at sunrise and bring food, having none then. The Indians' hospitality before and after a new calamity. As the sun rose next morning, the Indians appeared as they promised, bringing an abundance of fish and of certain roots which taste like nuts, some bigger than walnuts, some smaller, mostly grubbed from the water with great labor. That evening they came again with more fish and roots, and brought their women and children to look at us. They thought themselves rich with the little bells and beads we gave them, and they repeated their visits on other days. Being provided with what we needed, we thought to embark again. It was a struggle to dig our barge out of the sand it had sunk in, and another struggle to launch her. For the work in the water while launching, we stripped and stowed our clothes in the craft. Quickly clambering in and grabbing our oars, we had rowed 2 crossbow shots from shore when a wave inundated us. Being naked and the cold intense, we let our oars go. The next big wave capsized the barge. The inspector and 2 others held fast, but that only carried them more certainly underneath, where they drowned. A single roll of the sea tossed the rest of the men into the rushing surf and back onto shore, half drowned. We lost only those the barge took down, but the survivors escaped as naked as they were born, with a loss of everything we had. That was not much, but valuable to us in that bitter November cold, our bodies so emaciated we could easily count every bone and looked the very picture of death. I can say for myself that from the month of May I had eaten nothing but corn, and that sometimes raw. I never could bring myself to eat any of the horse meat at the time our beasts were slaughtered, and fish I did not taste 10 times. On top of everything else, a cruel north wind commenced to complete our killing. The Lord willed that we should find embers while searching the remnants of our former fire. We found more wood, and soon had big fires raging. Before them, with flowing tears, we prayed for mercy and pardon, each filled with pity not only for himself, but for all his wretched fellows. At sunset, the Indians, not knowing we had gone, came again with food. When they saw us looking so strangely different, they turned back in alarm. I went after them, calling, and they returned, though frightened. I explained to them by signs that our barge had sunk, and 3 of our number drowned. They could see at their feet 2 of the dead men who had washed ashore. They could also see that the rest of us were not far from joining these 2. The Indians, understanding our full plight, sat down and lamented for half an hour so loudly they could have been heard a long way off. It was amazing to see these wild, untaught savages howling like brutes in compassion for us. It intensified my own grief at our calamity and had the same effect on the other victims. When the cries died down, I conferred with the Christians about asking the Indians to take us to their homes. Some of our number who had been to New Spain warned that the Indians would sacrifice us to their idols. But death being sure and nearer if we stayed where we were, I went ahead and beseeched the Indians. They were delighted. They told us to tarry a little while, then they would do as we wished. Presently 30 of them gathered loads of wood and disappeared to their huts, which were a long walk away, while we waited with the remainder until near nightfall. Then, supporting us under our arms, they hurried us from one to another of the 4 big fires they had built along the path. At each fire, when we regained a little warmth and strength, they took us on so swiftly our feet hardly touched ground. Thus we made their village, where we saw they had erected a hut for us with many fires inside. An hour later they began a dance celebration that lasted all night. For us there was no joy, feasting, or sleep, as we waited the hour they should make us victims. In the morning, when they brought us fish and roots, and acted in every way hospitably, we felt reassured and somewhat lost our anxiety of the sacrificial knife. Cabeza de Vaca learned that men from one of the other barges had also landed on the island, bringing the number of Europeans there to about 90. In a matter of weeks, all but 16 of them died of disease, which spread to the Karankawas and killed half of them as well. Some of the Karankawas wanted to put the remaining Europeans to death, but were dissuaded by Cabeza de Vaca's host. Cabeza de Vaca and his men were later forced to act as healers. How we became medicine men. The islanders wanted to make physicians of us without examination or a review of diplomas. Their method of cure is to blow on the sick, the breath and the laying on of hands supposedly casting out the infirmity. They insisted we should do this too and be of some use to them. We scoffed at their cures and at the idea we knew how to heal, but they withheld food from us until we complied. An Indian told me I knew not whereof I spoke in saying their methods had no effect. Stones and other things growing about in the fields, he said, had a virtue, whereby passing a pebble along the stomach could take away pain and heal. Surely extraordinary men like us embodied such powers over nature. Hunger forced us to obey, but disclaiming any responsibility for our failure or success. An Indian falling sick would send for a medicine man who would apply his cure. The patient would then give the medicine man all he had and seek more from his relatives to give. The medicine man makes incisions over the point of the pain, sucks the wound, and cauterizes it. This remedy enjoys high repute among the Indians. I have, as a matter of fact, tried it on myself with good results. The medicine men blow on the spot they have treated as a finishing touch, and the patient regards himself relieved. Our method, however, was to bless the sick, breathe upon them, recite a Pater Noster and Ave Maria, and pray earnestly to God our Lord for their recovery. When we concluded with the sign of the cross, He willed that our patients should directly spread the news that they had been restored to health. In consequence, the Indians treated us kindly. They deprived themselves of food to give to us, and presented us skins and other tokens of gratitude.